Hey everyone, I want to welcome you back to I Told My Wife I'm Paying Bills. I'm Slim, and really quick, I just wanted to kind of do a quick intro for Chris's episode. I don't know if y'all remember, I did say that Chris Black and I were going to all start doing video pretty soon. Well, right now we're doing our testing, like I was talking about, and I thought about it. I don't think Chris ever had an episode or on the episodes we had Chris. I don't remember him ever kind of going into his intro into gaming. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to go ahead and give him his own shot. I wanted to give him a chance to actually talk about it. So, I was like, okay, well, we're testing. Go ahead. Let's try it out. Please, if you don't mind, go ahead and give us a little bit of an intro into you, into Chris. How did you become a gamer? What was it, your experiences and everything like that? As you can guess, he was probably nervous. He was, wasn't with the guys, but he did really well. So if you get a chance, go ahead and stick with it. It's an awesome episode. I really appreciate Chris. Thank you again for doing that. I really appreciate it. It was awesome. Um, and it's really cool to hear uh, someone else talking about their gaming experiences from someone who was there at the beginning of gaming. Chris is he's the elder statesman, and I'm not trying to joke here. It's like he made the joke about it himself, but honestly, he out of the three of us, he is the statesman out of all three of us, and he's actually seen gaming from the beginning. So, um, I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. It was really cool, and I really appreciate listening to Chris and talking about it. It was really hard too because I was in the background. So you'll see a couple of times Chris paused. You'll see a lot of cuts and different stuff there because I was in the background helping Chris along. Uh, but it was hard not to focus on what he was saying because he's telling these stories and he's talking about his gaming, and listening to it, I was amazed. So, uh, thank you again, Chris. Everyone, please enjoy leveling up in age. This is Chris's episode, our bonus episode of I Told My Wife I'm Paying Bills, and you'll see me again at the end, giving you out all our socials. So, thanks again.
Hello, I'm Chris, and I'm from the I Told My Wife I'm Paying Bills podcast. And today I was going to be doing a little bit of a solo flow, and I guess I was going to just discuss, my journey through gaming. My first encounter as far as video games went was probably a little mechanical arcade game, dartboard that they had at Shakey's Pizza. And it was mainly mechanics and flashing lights, but it was just really cool for a kid to see, what looked like the illusion of a dart moving across the board, even if it was just little blips of light. I was really attracted to it by the challenge, and that it was actually something I could actually interact with, and it would actually look like it was occurring on a screen. I guess was probably the thing that really attracted me to that particular game the most when I first saw it. Around about probably in the early or to mid 70s, I was introduced to gaming at home by the Telstar systems, which were like Pong, which basically only played like maybe one or two games, but the main thing they mainly played was Pong, which was just a little, for those who probably sure most people know what it is, but it's like a little tennis game, but it's just two little paddles moving up and down the screen that you control with little knobs, and the bounces a little square dot across the screen. Pong is definitely one of the first games that I would say, got addicted to, because it was pretty neat to actually just be able to sit there and actually play like a little competitive sport at home. After Pong, really, there was the surgence in arcade gaming. And so all of a sudden you were going to the arcades for a quarter. You could sit there, and which was pretty hard to come by when you're an unemployed kid. But we'd go and hang out at the arcades, and people would line up quarters along the front of the machines in order to mark the number of times that they were going to be playing before you would actually get a chance, or you would wander around and all the lights, bells, and whistles, and all of a sudden, with the technology and and sprites and things getting different at the time or getting better at the time, all of a sudden you were seeing like all these this form of animation, and then that led into its own form of arcade game where they started coming up with the laserdisc games where it was basically just an interactive movie, but or with interactive digital parts spread over it in a lot of cases. But well, either that or just the straight up interactive movies where you were just selecting the next scene, like your Space Aces and your Dragon Slayers. Definitely look those up if you haven't seen them. But and especially Firefox, the one that was based on the movie of the same name, which was one of the more ones with the digital layovers with the footage put behind it. But it was pretty incredible. But it was a pretty good preview of what you were going to see and what you wanted to kind of reach for in the future as far as the interaction of gaming went. And around about the time you were getting things like the Sega arcade games like Hang On, and then they came out with Afterburner, which was not a flight sim, but they had versions of it that you could actually sit in and would move, and so that was like going to that was basically like going to a mini version of like a theme park, because all of a sudden you were sitting there and all of a sudden you were interacting, and it it was just neat. After that, yeah, the home consoles started really coming out, and a lot of those early ones, they tried to put out home versions of some of those arcade games on them, and to varying degrees, which actually started around. Actually jumped around a bit because it actually started with the Atari 2600, uh, which was one of the early game consoles, home consoles, and it was one of the early ones that you could actually take and put different games into it, as opposed to like the Telstar system, which only had like the one or two built-in games. And you got the chance to actually experience consoleized versions of the arcade games. But of course, with the technology being very, very, um, well, the arcade stuff was really expensive, so you weren't getting that at home at, at first. And so, yeah, but they did the best they could with the technology that they had at home. And as they got the first generation of some of them weren't quite as good, but as the generations got better and the basically like the difference between the first Pac-Man and then the eventual Miss Pac-Man are leaps and bounds as far as like how well the technology went on the 2600. After the Atari era, there was a period where you could barely get gaming because apparently it had fallen out of. It just wasn't as financially feasible because of a gaming market crash that happened, and I think it got to the point, and it happened. A lot of it was because they were allowing any and everybody to produce games for it, and the market got oversaturated. And at the time, um, one of the games that was mass produced at the time was a game called E.T. the Extraterrestrial that was based on the movie of the same name. And that movie and that game were of two really varying differences in quality. That game was one of the worst things I've ever played, even to this day. And it really caught a lot of flack because it was blamed for the crash in the market at the time, but it was probably contributed, but really wasn't as big as of a factor as people thought at the time. But after that lull in probably an 8 to 10 year period, I guess, that was along came the NES, which had started gaining popularity as the Famicom in Japan, and then they decided they wanted to try to market it over here in a form, of course, that Americans would adapt to. And the first versions of it came with they had like a standard version, and then another version that had like a little device called Rob the Robot in it, which was apparently just a switch and not really a robot, but it was really cool to look at the time. So at that point, yeah, I got into the NES, and we started playing, especially like with the early games that came with it, which was the your Duck Hunts and your Mario Brothers, and which were pretty far better representations of the arcade versions of those games than the previous generation's games were. So all of a sudden, it really did feel like you were playing the arcade versions at your home. And after that, I remember really the game that probably defined things and really carried things on for me. And was one of the defining DNA for the games that I actually am attracted to now was the game The Legend of Zelda. And one of my fondest memories of that was one afternoon. My parents were supposed to be going out of town for a trip that was supposed to last between 8 to 10 hours. And during this time, I sat down right after they left to play Legend of Zelda, and all of a sudden, I noticed that there was the door was starting to move behind me, and realized that they were coming back in from their trip, and that I had been sitting there playing that game for the whole time, over 8 hours. And basically, I still love adventure style games to this day. Which, when it comes down to it, I was actually inspired by one of my favorite early games was Adventure for the Atari 2600, which pretty much was a precursor into Legend of Zelda. After the NES, around about the time I was going into, shortly after that period, I went into the military, and so then the new technology started hitting the 16-bit consoles, which led me into, and all of a sudden now I've got a little, I got a little military money to spend, and not a whole lot of responsibilities other than, other than the military responsibilities. Yeah, that was around about the time that the Sega Genesis came along, and the Super Nintendo, and the matter of fact, and then the Sega, yeah, matter of fact, around about the time the Sega Genesis started experimenting with the CD projects, and the Sega CD came out, which was actually, yeah, and then from there uh, on up to, yeah, the PlayStation, and then the PlayStation 2. And it's funny because at first I wasn't super big on the Xbox when it first came out, but all of a sudden, because I was like the same games were coming out, but then once you see them side by side and real, and a lot of, there are occasionally a port here and there that came out better on the on the basically on the PlayStation. But yeah, for the most part though, yeah, once you actually saw the thing in playing, it became pretty impressive. And and it had a hard drive built into it, so all of a sudden you see where a game, the next phase of where a game is going. And after around about that time, shortly after that, it led up into the Xbox One era. I take it back. I'm sorry, I missed the whole 360 and PlayStation 3 era, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Matter of fact, I will still say I think that as far as consoles go, despite the multiple failures of I had so much fun with the 360. I think that was probably still probably my favorite console. I don't really love them all, but yeah, that was probably as far as my consoles go, just because it was one I spent the most time with. But because of all those failures, I spent a lot of quality time with the daggone PlayStation 3, which I adored. And especially when the guy came around to, as far as like me loving gimmicks and new technology, when I was able, when they started coming out with the 3D games, and I started playing around with experiment with the 3D technology, which I'm I'm still to this day a 3D movie enthusiast to an extent, so I still love those. But I get the gimmick, but they're fun. But after that period led into my into the Xbox One era, which around about that time, the first presentation for the Xbox One almost made me turn my back on that console at the time. But My stand in with that console was saved by my son, who was into the Xbox ecosystem with his friends, and so I didn't quite move out. Although, like I said, I'm not really the type that sticks with one console anyway. So it was eventually there was going to be the next version of the PlayStation here, at some point. But it was just that, yeah, as far as when we dove into that next generation of consoles, started off with the Xbox One, which inadvertently kind of led me into the PC era, and where all of a sudden started, I've always been, read and compared and looked at the differences between the consoles and the PC, and I always realized that the PC experience was going to be different and a slightly upgraded, experience. But I wasn't ready for just how much. And then it was like, by the time I actually was able to get around to getting and affording a gaming PC, I started actually, I was still kind of, mostly playing on consoles and occasionally popping over to the PC. But then one day I had been playing the Just Cause, matter of fact, Just Cause 3, if I'm not mistaken, to be precise. And all of a sudden, a while later, I got a version of it for the PC. I got to play the PC version, and the differences were night and day. There were elements of that game that I don't even remember seeing in the Xbox One version. I remember being amazed at just seeing that there were birds flying around in the sky, and the fact that the frame rate wasn't stuttering or buffering every few explosions or whatever. And it was just after that I was like, there's no going back, not to not to that same level of technology. And it's like, and I, as far I'm still one of those people who enjoys the gameplay more, but when you can get smooth gameplay and a good frame rate, yeah, it's a whole. And then so I started going back to PC versions of console games that I had already finished and comparing them. And my next step was I started going into the Arkham games, which at the time was, yeah, was Arkham. Yeah, at the time was Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, and I was so blown away at how much better they played on the PC that I immediately played back through both of them, all the way through. And after that, I was kind of like, even though I've still tried to keep up with the consoles, I've kind of gotten to the point where for this console generation, I did get an Xbox Series X, but I didn't invest into a PlayStation 5 this generation, because I knew that the games that I actually really wanted to play were either coming out on console or were going to, or I could still play them on a PlayStation 4. So there were, so yeah, after that, I just kind of went back and started, um, basically, yeah, and they were basically had more in common with PCs than consoles of old anyway. So I really didn't see a need. Plus, there were, flexible things like if I wanted to connect the VR headset to the PC, and even though PlayStation had their VR headset and things, I was kind of I love VR, but not enough to keep adapting into it on every console system I got. I save some money somewhere, and well, once again, most of those experiences is I could get in other ways and on PC. So basically, as far as consoles go, I think at this point, other than maybe buying a refurbished console in the future as they come out with the newer ones, I don't really see myself investing in a whole lot more into upcoming consoles, I mean, into the next generation of consoles per se, as opposed to just upgrading my PC. Because even though there's, the thing about consoles is that you don't really have to spend a whole lot of time tweaking them and getting the games to work properly on them, because they use well, if they don't work right out of the box, they eventually will get a patch that usually takes care of that. And whereas with PC, you can sometimes you can take a little tweaking, and then on top of that, then you probably might have to wait for a patch anyway. But and there's a lot more finagling and a lot more messing around with things. But yeah, I still kind of prefer that as opposed to having into what they expect with the consoles today. And not to mention, most of the consoles are designed around subscription services and things of this kind of that nature. And I'm just like, I'm kind of burnt out on all of that at this point. Matter of fact, and and it's and as an old aging gamer, I get the business models change, and you have to adapt to the current player base and whatnot. I'm kind of aging out of a lot of that anyway, and the fact that I do game mostly solo anyway, kind of it doesn't really pay off for me, kind of. So the way I look at it nowadays, I kind of just want to pay for a game, invest in it, play that game, and not have to worry about the parts of that game going away later. Which I'm like, because one of the things that just really changed my attitude on a lot of the way I perceive gaming now is the fact that there's games that I can't play that back in the day when if you bought a game, you get to play that game, and I mean, my technically, if I pulled my Atari 2600 out of the closet, I could still play those games. Even though it takes some finagling because of technology, certain things in there are just burnt out and won't work nowadays. But there are ways of actually, emulating or new versions of that I can actually play those old games as they were. And then I compare that to my experience with Destiny 2, a game that I actually loved for a good little while, and after I got it, but it is the version of that game that I bought, I can't play anymore. And you can't just go back nostalgically and reminisce on that. So at that point, like I said, I get it. I get the business models more. They want you to be in subscription models now, which Destiny kind of was, but you could opt in and out of the DLC and stuff. But it would be nice to just be able to go back to, the areas where the things in that game that are no longer there. But anyway, going back to the types of games that I actually like on a PC, which is and console, where games where, like I said, adventure games and things that I can spend some time exploring in, and I don't really have to worry about the experience being taken away. And some of my favorite games as far as PC gaming goes right now, especially fitting in with I really like games where I can have like fast, fluid movement and have a lot of exploration. Lately, one of my favorites has been the Dishonored series. Most of my time nowadays has been spent playing games like, or the game I probably spend most of the time in recently has been Dishonored 2. And between that, or just in general, the Dishonored series, because after I finished 2 for the first time, I just went back and I already owned Dishonored 1, but just kind of fell off of it because of how rigid the morality system kind of seemed. Although there's kind of ways around that, but I went back and played that and thoroughly enjoyed it and realized that I pretty much loved everything that they put out, all except for maybe that vampire game they put out, which I just never jumped into. Yeah, it was one of the few games that I actually heard so much negative stuff about. I was like, yeah, I think I'll listen. I'll take their word for it on that one. But the other games that they have, including like the Dishonored series, and Prey, and yeah, those games really they hit both my love of kind of fluid movement and some deep exploration, especially environmental storytelling. Matter of fact, and between that and I've actually been enjoying like the all things the Hot Wheels games. Those have been pretty fun to jump into and out of lately. But yeah, and I'm always up for a good racing game as far as PCs go. So yeah, and we're getting kind of close. Yeah, getting close to time here, but I want to wrap this up. But I really, as far as as far as gaming in the future goes, I'm kind of at the point where I think that we've kind of, as far as graphics go, while things will get, more realistic and as technology gets better, I'm at a pretty satisfied pace right now. But as far as graphics, I'm not sure just how much better things are going to get. But I'm looking forward to seeing where hopefully where it goes. But I am definitely I'm in a good period as far as like what I enjoy about gaming because I can. There's always something I can just pop in and pick up whatever mood I'm in and jump in and play. So that's pretty much just a very long-winded version of my history as far as video gaming. But anyway, well, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. But thank you for those of you who decided to sit and spend your time listening to an old man rant about video games. And That was just a little example of my journey through gaming from the earliest days up till now, and I'm very much looking forward to getting back with the fellas because this was a lot of pressure, and I'm looking forward to actually being able to feed back off of them. But anyway, until next time, this is Told My Wife I'm playing Bill's podcast, and this is Chris. I'm signing off, and see you later.
Hey everyone, I'm back. It's Slim again. I hope y'all enjoyed that episode. Like I said, it was really interesting, especially finding out the differences in the older game systems, the Famicom, and like just when he started playing the story about his family when he played Legend of Zelda for 8 hours. Any real gamers can relate. I've been playing video games where I started out in the morning, early in the morning, like 10 o'clock in the morning. Next thing I know is 7 p.m. And I was there for the whole day sitting in the same spot. No going to the bathroom, no eating, none of that. So if you're a gamer, you can relate, right? But anyway, uh, thanks again, Chris. That was a really good episode. I really truly enjoyed it. I wanted to just kind of bookend this episode. Uh as y'all can see, I got the show enough picture right there. I went to Atlantic Con this weekend, and I'm going to talk about that on the next episode. We're going to have a Superman episode. I'm not sure exactly when it is. That might be another solo episode to where I'm actually interviewing or talking to someone, because we may do it live, we may just do it a video recording, we may just do it audio. I don't know yet. I'm still working out the guest, so we're gonna figure that one out. It's all good. Got a couple other more things coming in. Black is gonna do his solo episode while we're trying to figure it out. I'm gonna do my wiring so I can actually go ahead and stream some more. I have to move my Xbox because my TV that my Xbox is normally on just died on me. Sucks. So I'll be gaming some more. I may move my Xbox upstairs. And if I do that, that's going to get me to streaming even faster. So working on all of that. Uh, Thanks everyone who's sticking with me. Everyone who's subscribing, I appreciate it. I'm about to give y'all the socials. So if y'all want to follow us, email us, contact us for anything else. If you're someone, another creator, and you kind of want to do something together, hit us up. But if you just found this episode and you like us and you want to see what more we have, you can actually follow us on Instagram at Told My Wife Podcast. You could follow us on Facebook. I Told My Wife I'm Paying Bills. You can subscribe to our YouTube page. I Told My Wife I'm Paying Bills Podcast. You can email us at toldmywifepodcast@gmail.com. You can find me on TikTok at SlimTaurus78. You can actually find our podcast. I created a TikTok for the podcast, so I'm putting more podcast content, but I'm also putting a little bit of other content. Like I said, I went to Atlantic Con, so I just posted a video at Atlantic Con of all the different pictures that I took. So if you want to check us out on our podcast TikTok page, it's at Told My Wife Podcast. So please check us out, like, follow, subscribe, share, and we are planning, and I know I've been saying this a while, but trust me, as you can see, we're moving slowly because we're trying to get this right. So we're going to have more video, we're going to have more content for you, we're going to be going to shows, we're going to be doing different kind of interviews and things like that, because I kind of want to grow this podcast to something different, and I kind of want to have everyone to be able to come up. So there may be other shows kind of stemming from this one. We're seeing how this goes. But either way, I appreciate everyone who's been riding with us from the beginning, and everyone who's joining us, all the new people joining us and following us, everyone who's liking our Facebook page, our YouTube, and everything. Thank you so much. I truly, truly appreciate it. And everyone, matter of fact, thank the fellas. I want to thank the fellas for everything they're doing and how they're helping out, and you know, all the behind scenes stuff y'all can't see. Again, like I said, for this episode, I was behind the scenes helping Chris out. There are some weird cuts in there, but that's because we're learning. All right. But I wanted to say I appreciate everyone. Thank you so much. And can't wait to see you in the next episode. But whether you're binging or button mashing, we definitely will see you in the next episode. Have a good one, everybody.